The cargo bay doors of the Horizon's Edge hissed open, and Taemin adjusted his research tablet for the third time in as many minutes. He wasn't nervous exactly, but working with a Lixian for the first time did make his heart beat a little faster. The alliance between humans and the Lixians was only 5 years old, and most people still treated each other like fragile glass that might break at any wrong word. A figure stepped through the doorway, and Taemin found himself staring. Velara stood nearly 7 feet tall, her scaled skin catching the light in ways that made her seem to shimmer. Patterns of bioluminescence ran along her arms and neck, currently displaying a cool, professional silver blue. Her eyes were large and amber-colored, with vertical pupils that focused on him with unsettling intensity. "You are the human xenobiologist," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice had a musical quality that the translators couldn't quite capture. "That's me, Taemin." He extended his hand, then remembered that Lixians didn't shake hands. He awkwardly converted the gesture into a wave. "Welcome aboard." Velara's head tilted slightly, studying him. The patterns on her skin flickered briefly to an orange-yellow before returning to silver-blue. "We should begin immediately. The artifact awaits our analysis, and I do not wish to waste time on social pleasantries." So that was how it would be. Taemin picked up his equipment case and gestured toward the lab. "After you." The first 3 days were professionally cold. Velara worked with mechanical efficiency, speaking only when absolutely necessary. She found Taemin's habit of humming while he worked to be distracting and illogical. When he suggested they take a lunch break, she informed him that Lixians only needed to eat once every 30 hours and didn't understand why humans required such frequent sustenance. "We're weak that way," Taemin said with a grin, biting into his sandwich. "But we make up for it with our winning personalities." Velara's patterns flickered again, that same orange-yellow. Taemin was starting to think it might be confusion or annoyance. She returned to her microscope without comment. The artifact they were studying looked like a smooth crystal sphere, about the size of a basketball. It had been found drifting in space near the Kepler 442 system, and preliminary scans suggested it was millions of years old. When either Taemin or Velara examined it alone, it remained inert. But when they both stood near it, faint lights began to pulse deep within its core. "Fascinating," Velara murmured on the 4th day, her tone warming slightly. The readings suggest it responds to genetic diversity. Perhaps it was designed to activate only in the presence of multiple species. "Like it's looking for cooperation," Taemin added. "Maybe whoever made this wanted different kinds of people to work together." "People?" Velara's eye ridges rose. "It is an inanimate object." "I meant the ones who built it. Different species, I mean. Your habit of anthropomorphizing everything is inefficient. Your habit of being so serious all the time must be exhausting." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Taemin thought he'd gone too far. Then Velara's patterns shifted to a warm amber color, and he could have sworn the corner of her mouth twitched upward. "Perhaps we should transport the artifact to the planetary survey site," she said. "The moon in this system has unusual crystalline formations that may help us understand the artifact's composition." Taemin agreed, and they prepared the shuttle for departure. The flight should have been routine, just a simple hop to the moon's surface and back. But space had other plans. They were halfway to the moon when the solar flare hit. The sun of the Kepler 442 system erupted without warning, sending waves of radiation and electromagnetic chaos across the entire region. The shuttle's systems screamed alerts as Taemin fought with the controls. "Shields are failing," he shouted over the alarms. "I'm taking us down. Hold on." Velara moved with surprising speed, securing the artifact and strapping herself into the co-pilot seat. "The moon's surface shows cave systems. If we can reach them, the crystalline rock will provide natural radiation shielding." "On it!" The shuttle hit the moon's thin atmosphere hard, shaking violently as Taemin aimed for a canyon between towering crystal formations. They crashed more than landed, the shuttle skidding across glassy rock before slamming into the canyon wall. Taemin's head cracked against the console, and everything went bright with pain. When his vision cleared, Velara was leaning over him, her patterns cycling rapidly through colors he'd never seen before. Deep purple, bright red, back to purple. "Don't move," she said, her voice urgent. "You're bleeding." "I'm okay," Taemin managed, though his leg screamed in protest when he tried to stand. Looking down, he saw a piece of metal had torn through his suit and into his calf. "Okay, maybe not completely okay." Velara worked quickly, using the shuttle's medical supplies to clean and seal the wound. Her long fingers were surprisingly gentle. When she finished, she helped him to his feet, supporting his weight without complaint. "The shuttle's communications are destroyed," she reported. "Main power is offline. We have emergency supplies for approximately 6 days, but the Horizon's Edge won't know we're missing until we fail to report in 20 hours. Then they will need to locate us. So we're stuck here for a while." Taemin looked at the shattered shuttle, then at the cave entrance nearby. "At least we have shelter." They spent the next hour moving supplies into the cave. The crystal formations inside glowed faintly with their own light, casting everything in soft blue and purple hues. Taemin set up their emergency shelter, while Velara organized their food and water rations with mathematical precision. When night fell on the moon, the temperature dropped dramatically. They huddled near their small heating unit, the artifact resting between them. In the dim light, Taemin noticed that Velara's patterns had shifted to a deep blue color, steady and calm. "Are you scared?" he asked quietly. Velara was silent for a long moment. "Lixians do not experience fear in the way humans do, but I am uncertain. This was not part of my plans. Plans change. We'll be okay. The ship will find us." "You seem very certain." "I have to be. It's a human thing. We're optimistic to a fault." He smiled at her. "Besides, I've got good company. Even if she thinks my personality is inefficient." The patterns on Velara's skin flickered, shifting from blue to that warm amber color again. "I may have been premature in that assessment." Was that almost a compliment from the logical Lixian? "Do not push your fortune, human." But there was something different in her voice now, something almost warm. Taemin leaned back against the crystal wall, his leg throbbing but his spirits oddly high. They were stranded on an alien moon with limited supplies and no immediate rescue. But somehow, he felt like things might turn out better than expected. Outside the cave, strange luminescent creatures began to drift through the canyon, their lights dancing across the crystal walls. Velara watched them with what Taemin was learning to recognize as fascination, her patterns shifting to match their colors. Maybe being stranded wouldn't be so bad after all. The second day on the moon started with Taemin waking up to find Velara already awake, studying the cave walls with intense focus. Her patterns were a thoughtful green color that he hadn't seen before. "Morning," he said, wincing as he sat up. His leg felt better, but moving still hurt. "It is actually mid-cycle on this moon, not morning," Velara corrected, but her tone was softer than it had been on the ship. "How is your injury?" "Better. Your medical skills are impressive." Lixian physicians train for many years. "I have basic emergency training only." She turned to face him, and her patterns shifted to a pale yellow. "We should ration the food carefully. I have calculated our supplies. If we are rescued within 4 days, we will be fine." Taemin nodded and accepted the nutrition bar she handed him. It tasted like cardboard, but he smiled anyway. "Could be worse. We could be stuck here without that artifact to keep us company." "The artifact is not company. It is an object." "There you go again, being all logical." He took another bite of the bar. "Don't Lixians ever just talk about things that don't matter? Tell stories? Make jokes?" Velara sat down across from him, folding her long legs with graceful precision. "Our culture values efficiency and knowledge. What you call stories, we consider imprecise data. What you call jokes, we see as logical contradictions meant to confuse." "That sounds lonely." The words came out before Taemin could stop them. Velara's patterns flickered rapidly. Orange, then purple, then back to green. She was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps it is," she finally said. "I have never considered it from that perspective." Over the next few days, something changed between them. Maybe it was the isolation, or maybe it was the simple need for connection when faced with uncertainty, but they began to talk. Really talk. Taemin told her about Earth, about the ocean he grew up near, about the books he loved, and the music that made him feel alive. Velara listened with an intensity that made him feel like every word mattered. She asked questions constantly, trying to understand why humans created art, why they cried at sad movies, why they sought out experiences that had no logical benefit. Because it makes us feel something, Taemin explained one evening, as the luminescent creatures drifted past their cave again. Not everything needs a purpose. Sometimes beauty is enough. Velara watched the creatures in silence. Her patterns slowly shifted to a soft pink color. They are beautiful, she admitted. I can acknowledge that objectively. But what do you feel when you look at them? Feel? She seemed puzzled by the question. I am uncertain. There is something. A sensation I do not have words for. That's wonder, Taemin said gently. You're feeling wonder. Velara's patterns brightened to a brilliant pink, and Taemin realized he was seeing something rare. A Lixian experiencing emotion and not trying to suppress it. In return, Velara taught him about her people. She showed him Lixian meditation techniques that helped control pain, which made his injured leg much more bearable. She explained how bioluminescent patterns worked, how they were partially voluntary but also revealed involuntary emotional responses. So when your patterns turn orange-yellow, that's confusion? Taemin asked. Or frustration? Yes, she paused. You have been observing my patterns. Hard not to. They're fascinating and beautiful. Velara's patterns immediately shifted to a deep blue color, and she turned away quickly. That is, thank you. On the third night, as they sat watching the stars through the cave entrance, Taemin found himself talking about things he rarely shared with anyone. I never really fit in on Earth, he said quietly. I was always too interested in space, too obsessed with the idea of life beyond our planet. Other people wanted normal things, careers, families, staying in one place. I wanted to see everything out here. He gestured at the alien sky. Even my family thought I was running away from something. Were you? Velara asked. Maybe. Running from loneliness by going to the most lonely place imaginable. Funny how that works. He laughed, but it sounded sad even to his own ears. What about you? Why did you volunteer for this mission? Velara was quiet for so long that Taemin thought she wouldn't answer. Then her patterns shifted to that vulnerable deep blue again. My people believe that interest in other cultures is illogical. They say it distracts from pure scientific pursuit, from the advancement of Lixian knowledge. Her voice was soft. I have always been curious about other species, about how they think, how they live, what they value. My mentor said this was a weakness, that I should focus only on Lixian excellence. That's not weakness. That's being open-minded. You would say that. You are human. But there was no criticism in her voice. I volunteered for this mission to prove I could work with another species and still maintain my scientific integrity. To prove my curiosity was not a flaw. And? Velara turned to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight. I am beginning to think my people are wrong about many things. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Taemin felt his heart beating faster, but he didn't look away from her gaze. The rescue signal came on the morning of the fourth day. The Horizon's Edge had located them and was sending a shuttle. Taemin should have felt relieved, but instead, he felt a strange disappointment. These days in the cave had been the most honest, most connected he'd felt in years. As they packed up their supplies, Velara moved quietly, her patterns a muted gray color. Are you okay? Taemin asked. Of course. We are being rescued. This is the optimal outcome. But her patterns said otherwise. Taemin had learned to read them well enough to know that gray meant sadness or regret. The rescue shuttle arrived, and they were transported back to the Horizon's Edge. The medical team immediately took Taemin to the infirmary to properly treat his leg. By the time he was cleared and back to his quarters, he was exhausted. But sleep wouldn't come. He kept thinking about Velara, about their conversations, about the way her patterns had shifted to pink when she looked at the luminescent creatures. The next morning, he found a message waiting for him. It was from Velora, formal and professional. I wish to continue our work on the artifact. If you are willing, I have requested that we remain as research partners. Command has approved. Taemin smiled and sent back a simple reply. I'd like that. Over the following weeks, they fell back into working together, but everything was different now. They weren't just colleagues anymore. They were friends, though neither of them said it out loud. Velora's patterns brightened whenever Timon entered the lab. He found himself looking for excuses to stay late, to keep working just a little longer. The other Lixians on the ship began to notice. Taemin overheard two of them talking in the corridor, their patterns flickering with what looked like concern as they discussed Velora's unusual attachment to the human. But Velora didn't seem to care. She kept working with him, kept asking questions about human culture, kept displaying those beautiful patterns that Taemin was beginning to understand like a second language. The artifact responded more strongly to their presence now, its internal lights pulsing in complex patterns. Whatever it was designed to do, it seemed to like having them together. It's responding to us specifically, Velora said one day, studying the readings. Not just to multiple species, but to our combined presence, to you and me. Maybe it knows something we don't, Taemin said softly. Velora looked up from her console, and her patterns shifted through a rainbow of colors before settling on that warm amber he'd come to associate with her happiness. Perhaps it does, she whispered. Velora sat in her quarters, trying to meditate. It was a Lixian practice meant to clear the mind, to remove emotional interference and return to pure logic. But tonight, like every night for the past 2 weeks, it wasn't working. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Taemin smile. She heard his laugh. She remembered the way he'd looked at the luminescent creatures with such wonder, the way he'd shared his loneliness with her without shame, the way he made her feel like her curiosity about other species was something valuable instead of a weakness. Her patterns shifted involuntarily, cycling through colors she couldn't control. Pink, amber, a bright red that meant something she didn't want to name. This was a problem, a significant problem. Lixians didn't form emotional attachments easily. Their society was built on logic, on the advancement of knowledge, on individual excellence. Romance existed among her people, but it was rare and practical. Two Lixians might pair because their genetic profiles were compatible or because they shared research interests. Love, as humans understood it, was considered an inefficient distraction. But Velora couldn't stop thinking about Taemin, couldn't stop wanting to be near him, couldn't stop the way her patterns brightened whenever he walked into the lab. She was, by any definition, experiencing an emotional attachment to a human. To someone from a completely different species who ate too frequently and made jokes about things that weren't funny, and somehow made her feel more alive than she'd ever felt before. A knock at her door made her patterns flicker to surprised yellow. "Enter," she called. Jiwoo stepped in, carrying 2 cups of tea. The human woman was a linguist, someone Velora had worked with occasionally. She had a kind face and intelligent eyes that seemed to see too much. "Thought you might want some company," Jiwoo said, offering one of the cups. "You've been working really hard lately. Taemin mentioned you stayed in the lab until 0300 last night." Velora accepted the tea, even though she didn't particularly need it. The artifact is showing new response patterns. The research is at a critical stage. Uh-huh. Jiwoo sat down uninvited, smiling in that knowing way humans had. "And it has nothing to do with spending more time with a certain xenobiologist?" Velora's patterns went bright orange. "I do not understand what you are implying." "Sure you don't." Jiwoo sipped her tea. "Look, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, but it's pretty obvious to everyone on this ship that you and Taemin have something special going on. We are research partners, nothing more." "Velora." Jiwoo's voice was gentle. "Your patterns turn pink whenever you look at him. You laugh at his jokes now, even the bad ones, and he talks about you constantly." Velora found this fascinating. Velara had an interesting theory. Velara has the most amazing way of thinking. It's sweet. Velara set down her teacup with trembling hands. Her patterns were cycling rapidly now, completely out of her control. Even if what you are suggesting were true, it would be impossible, inappropriate. My people do not form such attachments, especially not with other species. But you have formed an attachment. It wasn't a question. Velara looked at Jiwoo and saw only kindness in the human woman's expression. Something inside her cracked, and the words came tumbling out. I do not know what is happening to me. I think about him constantly. When I am not with him, I want to be. When I am with him, I feel things I have no words for. My meditation techniques fail. My logic fails. He makes me want to experience emotions instead of suppressing them, and that terrifies me. Jiwoo smiled. That's called falling in love, Velara. Love? The word felt strange in her mouth. Lixians do not experience love as humans do. Maybe not before. But you are now. Jiwoo leaned forward. And I think you should tell him. Absolutely not. Velara's patterns went dark blue with fear. He is human. I am Lixian. Such a connection would be questioned by both our peoples. It could damage his career, his reputation. And I do not know if he feels the same way. Are you serious? Velara, that man is head over heels for you. He learned Lixian gesture protocols just so he wouldn't accidentally offend you. He stays late in the lab even when his shift is over. He asked me 3 times what your favorite human foods might be because he wants to surprise you with something nice. Velara's patterns blazed bright pink. He did. He did. And if you don't tell him how you feel, you're going to regret it. Jiwoo stood up. Life is short, Velara. Even shorter when you're exploring space. Don't waste time being afraid. After Jiwoo left, Velara sat in silence for a long time. Her patterns slowly shifted from chaotic colors to a steady, determined amber. The human was right. She needed to tell Timon the truth, but not yet. First, she needed to understand what she was feeling, needed to find the right words. The next day, the artifact revealed something extraordinary. As Timon and Velara ran their scans, it suddenly projected a holographic image. Ancient beings from a dozen different species appeared before them, working together, living together. The images showed a civilization that had embraced diversity instead of fearing it. This is incredible, Timon breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. They built an entire society on cross-species cooperation. Velara watched the holograms with growing fascination. She saw beings as different from each other as she was from Timon, and yet they clearly cared for one another. In one image, 2 creatures from completely different species held appendages in what looked like affection. They loved each other, she whispered, across species boundaries. They made it work. Timon turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her patterns shift to that bright pink color again. Yeah, he said softly. They did. They watched the projections together in silence, standing close enough that Velara could feel the warmth radiating from Timon's body. Humans ran warmer than Lixians. She found it comforting. When the projections faded, they walked back toward their quarters together, something they'd started doing every night. In the corridor, they encountered Hyunwoo, the ship's first officer. The man smiled at them with knowing eyes. Good evening, he said. How goes the research? Very well, Timon replied. The artifact is revealing some amazing things about ancient civilizations. The best discoveries usually are the ones we don't expect to find, Hyunwoo said, his gaze moving between them meaningfully. The universe has a way of surprising us when we're open to it. Don't you think? He walked away before either of them could respond, leaving them alone in the empty corridor. Velara's hearts were beating fast, both of them. Lixians had 2 hearts, and right now both were racing. Timon, she said quietly, I need to speak with you, formally, in private. He looked at her with those warm brown eyes that had somehow become the center of her entire world. Okay, when? Tomorrow evening, my quarters. There is something I must tell you. Is everything all right? Velara's patterns shifted to a rainbow of colors. Fear, hope, determination, affection, all swirling together. I do not know yet, but I will know after we speak. That night, Velara didn't meditate. Instead, she practiced what she would say. She rehearsed the words in both Lixian and human languages, trying to find the perfect way to explain emotions that her people didn't have proper words for. She was going to tell Taman the truth. That logic had failed her, that her careful control had crumbled, that when she looked at him, she felt something humans called love, and she was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Tomorrow, everything would change. For better or worse, she would be honest. And honesty, she had learned from Tai Min, was the most human thing she could do. Tai Min couldn't concentrate. He'd been staring at the same data readout for 20 minutes, and none of the numbers made sense. His mind kept wandering to Velara's request for a private meeting, to the serious tone in her voice, to the way her patterns had cycled through so many colors. Maybe she was going to request a new research partner. Maybe he'd done something wrong. Maybe she'd noticed that he couldn't stop staring at her, couldn't stop finding excuses to make her laugh, couldn't stop falling deeper and deeper into feelings that made no logical sense. He'd been in love before, or thought he had. But this was different. This was Velara, who challenged everything he thought he knew, who made him want to be better, who looked at the universe with such wonder that it made him see everything fresh and new again. And she was Lixian. He was human. Even if by some miracle she felt the same way, what kind of future could they possibly have? The day passed in a blur of anxiety. When evening finally came, Taemin stood outside Velara's quarters for a full minute before gathering the courage to press the door chime. "Enter," her voice called. The door slid open, and Taemin stepped into a space he'd never seen before. Velara's quarters were sparse but beautiful, decorated with crystals from various planets and star charts projected on the walls. She stood in the center of the room, her patterns cycling through nervous colors. Blue, purple, back to blue. "Thank you for coming," she said formally. "Please, sit." Timon sat on the low bench she indicated, and Velara remained standing. This was clearly going to be a formal conversation, conducted in the Lixian way. His stomach twisted with nervousness. "I asked you here because there is something I must tell you," Velara began, her voice steady even though her patterns were anything but. "It is not easy for me to say these things. My people value logic above emotion, clarity above confusion. But you have taught me that some things cannot be explained through logic alone." She paused, and her patterns shifted to a deep, vulnerable blue. "When I first met you, I thought you were inefficient, illogical, too emotional and too casual about serious work. I did not understand why you made jokes or told stories or cared about things that had no scientific value." Her voice softened. "But then we were stranded together, and I began to see differently. I began to understand that your emotions were not weaknesses but strengths, that your curiosity and wonder and joy made you see the universe in ways I never could." Taemin's heart was pounding. He didn't dare interrupt. "I have spent the past weeks trying to suppress what I was feeling," Velara continued. "I meditated. I applied logic. I told myself that what I was experiencing was merely professional respect, merely intellectual fascination. But I was lying to myself." She finally met his eyes, and her patterns blazed bright pink. "Taemin, my people do not have adequate words for this, so I will use yours. I have fallen in love with you, completely and illogically. When I am with you, all my careful control disappears. When I am not with you, I wish I was. You make me want to experience emotions instead of suppressing them. You make me want to be brave enough to feel things that terrify me." Taemin couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at Velara as her patterns continued to shift through shades of pink and amber. "I know this is impossible," she said, and now her voice cracked slightly. "I know our peoples would question this. I know it could damage both our careers. I know that you are human, and I am Lixian, and we are too different, and this makes no logical sense. But when I look at you, logic fails me. and I needed you to know the truth, even if you do not feel the same way." The room fell silent. Velara stood waiting, her pattern slowly dimming to a sad gray as the seconds stretched on. Timon finally found his voice. "I've known for weeks," he said softly. Velara's patterns flickered with confusion. "Known what?" "That you had feelings for me." "Your patterns, Velara. I spent days studying Lixian biology after we got back from the moon. I learned what all the colors mean. Pink for affection, amber for happiness. The way you brightened every time I walked into the lab." He stood up slowly, his legs shaking. "I've been waiting, hoping. Terrified that I was reading the signs wrong." You knew?" Her patterns were blazing now, cycling rapidly through surprise and hope and fear. "I knew. And I've been falling in love with you since our third day on that moon, when you stayed awake all night monitoring my fever. You thought I was too delirious to notice, but I saw your patterns cycling through worried colors. I saw how much you cared, even when you were trying to pretend you didn't." Timon took a step closer to her. "Can I show you something?" Velara nodded, unable to speak. He raised his hand slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. Then, he pressed his palm to hers in the Lixian gesture of deep respect and affection, the one he'd spent hours researching, the one that meant trust and connection and the willingness to be vulnerable. "I learned this for you," he said quietly, "because I wanted to be able to tell you how I felt in a way you would understand, because you're the most amazing person I've ever met, and I don't care that you're Lixian and I'm human. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I just care about you." Velara's patterns exploded into the brightest, most beautiful colors Timon had ever seen. Golds and pinks and ambers all swirling together in a symphony of emotion. Her hand pressed back against his, warm and solid and real. "I care about you too," she whispered. "So much it frightens me." "Being scared is okay. Being scared means it matters." They stood there, hands pressed together, neither wanting to break the connection. Timon had never felt more certain of anything in his life. This was right. This was real. This was worth whatever challenges they would face. "What do we do now?" Velara asked. "Now we figure it out together. We take it one day at a time. We learn about each other's needs and boundaries. We communicate. We make mistakes and fix them. We prove that this can work. What if we cannot? What if our differences are too great?" Timon smiled. "Then we'll be the first to bridge them. That ancient civilization in the artifact? They figured it out. So can we." Velara's patterns settled into a steady, warm amber. "You make it sound so simple." "It won't be simple, but it will be worth it. You're worth it." She made a sound that might have been a Lixian laugh, soft and musical. "You are also worth it, even if you do eat too frequently and make terrible jokes. My jokes are excellent. They are objectively terrible. But I find I do not mind." They stayed like that for a long time, hands pressed together, patterns and hearts in sync. Outside, the stars drifted past the viewport, endless and beautiful. Inside, two beings from different worlds had found something that transcended all their differences. Love didn't need logic. It didn't need to make sense. It just needed to be honest and brave and willing to try. And they were both willing to try. 6 months had passed since that evening in Velara's quarters, and the Horizon's Edge felt like a different ship. Or maybe Timon was just seeing it differently now that everything had changed. He walked through the corridors toward the research lab, nodding at crew members who had become familiar faces. Some smiled at him warmly. Others still looked uncertain, their expressions careful when they saw him. Not everyone approved of his relationship with Velara, but that was expected. Change always met resistance. The lab doors opened, and there she was. Velara stood at the main console, her patterns cycling through focused green colors as she analyzed data. When she sensed him enter, they immediately shifted to warm amber. Even after 6 months, that instant brightening when she saw him made his heart skip. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying that musical quality he loved. "The artifact has revealed another layer of data. I think you will find it fascinating." Timon crossed to her side, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. This casual nearness had taken time to develop. Lixians valued personal space differently than humans, and they'd spent weeks learning each other's comfort zones, negotiating boundaries, figuring out what worked for both of them. "Show me," he said. They worked together for several hours, falling into the easy rhythm they'd developed. Velara would spot patterns in the data, and Taemin would theorize about their meaning. He would suggest wild possibilities, and she would ground them in scientific reality. They balanced each other perfectly. Around midday, two junior researchers entered the lab. Haewon was human, young and enthusiastic. Yoonji was Lixian, slightly older and more reserved. The two had started as rivals, competing for the same research grant, but lately, something had changed between them. "Excuse us," Haewon said, looking nervous. "We were hoping we could ask you both some questions about working across species, about communication and understanding differences." Taemin and Velara exchanged a glance. Velara's patterns flickered with amusement. "Of course," Velara said. "What would you like to know?" Yoonji stepped forward. "How do you navigate cultural misunderstandings?" "Haewon and I are trying to collaborate on a project, but we keep having conflicts about methodology and approach." "That's normal," Taemin said with a smile. "Velara and I still disagree about things all the time. The key is respect and willingness to listen. And patience," Velara added. "Understanding another species takes time. There is no shortcut. You must be willing to learn and to make mistakes." Haewon grinned. "So it gets easier?" "Some things do. Others remain challenging. But the challenges become part of the journey rather than obstacles." Velara's patterns shifted to soft pink. "If the connection is meaningful, the effort is worthwhile." The two junior researchers thanked them and left, talking quietly to each other. Taemin watched them go, a warm feeling in his chest. "We're setting an example," he said softly, "whether we meant to or not." "Is that concerning to you?" "No, it's hopeful. Change has to start somewhere." Not everyone shared that hope. The relationship had faced opposition from the beginning. Some Lixian officials had formally complained about Velara's inappropriate emotional attachment that might compromise her scientific objectivity. Some humans whispered that Taemin was making a mistake, that interspecies relationships were too complicated, that he should find someone of his own kind. But they'd also found unexpected support. Jiwoo had become a close friend to both of them, often mediating when cultural misunderstandings arose. Hyunwoo had quietly arranged for them to share lab schedules, making it easier to work together. And slowly, other crew members had begun to accept what they represented. The real breakthrough came a week later, when they presented their complete findings on the artifact to the Galactic Council via long-range communication. Taemin stood beside Velara in the ship's main conference room, facing the holographic images of council members from a dozen different species. The artifact floated between them, its internal lights pulsing gently. "This device was created by a civilization that existed over 3 million years ago," Velara began, her voice steady and professional. "They were composed of multiple species working together as equals. Our research shows they achieved technological and social advances far beyond our current capabilities." Taemin continued, "But they didn't collapse because of war or disease. They failed because they chose isolation after a galaxy-wide catastrophe. Each species retreated to their own worlds, breaking the bonds they'd built. The artifact was left as a warning and a hope. A warning that unity requires constant effort, and a hope that future civilizations would choose differently." The council members listened intently. Some looked skeptical. Others seemed moved. "The artifact responds most strongly to genuine cross-species cooperation," Velara said, "not just working together, but truly understanding and caring for one another. It was designed to activate only when beings from different worlds formed real connections." One council member, a being made of crystalline structures, spoke up. "And you two have formed such a connection?" Taemin looked at Velara, and she met his eyes. Her patterns shifted through rainbow colors, no longer trying to hide what she felt. "Yes," they said together. There was a long silence. Then another council member, this one human, spoke. "Your research is groundbreaking. But I think what you represent might be even more important than the data. You've shown us that the bridges between species can be built with more than treaties and trade agreements. They can be built with understanding, with friendship, with love. After the presentation ended, Taimin and Velara found themselves alone in the lab again. The artifact pulsed softly between them, as if satisfied with what they'd accomplished. That went well, Taimin said. Better than I expected. Velara's patterns were a peaceful amber. I was concerned they would focus on our relationship rather than our research. I think our relationship is part of the research. We're living proof that the ancient civilization was right. Velara turned to him, her amber eyes bright. What will we do now? The project is essentially complete. Request a new one. Keep working together. Keep proving that this works. He smiled. Unless you're tired of being stuck with me? Never. Her patterns blazed bright pink. You are still inefficient and make terrible jokes, but you are also the most important person in my life. I do not wish to work with anyone else. That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Do not push your fortune, human. But she was smiling, that subtle expression he'd learned to recognize. They stood there in comfortable silence, two beings from different worlds who had found something neither expected. Later that evening, Taimin took Velara to the observation deck. It was empty at this hour, just them and the stars. He pulled up a star chart on his tablet. I've been working on something, he said. The ship's informal navigation system lets crew members name constellations for personal reference. I named one for you. He projected the chart, and a cluster of stars highlighted in the viewport. Velara's bridge. Her patterns shifted through surprised yellow to touched pink. You named stars for me? Not just any stars. These connect Earth's sector to the Lixian home system, a literal bridge between our worlds. Velara was quiet for a moment, her patterns swirling with emotion. What does it bridge? She finally asked. Taimin wrapped his arm around her shoulders, a human gesture she'd learned to appreciate. She leaned into him, her cooler skin against his warmth. Everything that matters, he said softly. They stood together, watching the stars drift past. Two people who had proven that the universe was smaller and more connected than anyone dared to hope. The ancient civilization had left them a message, and they had answered it. Love didn't require logic. Understanding didn't require sameness. Connection didn't require being identical. All it required was courage, honesty, and the willingness to bridge the distance between different worlds. And they had built that bridge together one day, one conversation, one moment of vulnerability at a time. Outside the viewport, Velara's bridge sparkled in the darkness, a constellation of hope and proof that some distances were meant to be crossed. Inside, two hearts beat together, one human, two Lixian, all in sync. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but they had found the greatest mystery of all. That connection transcends all boundaries when two beings are brave enough to try. And they would keep trying, keep learning, keep building bridges between worlds, together.